Hi students, welcome back to the second lecture on protein metabolism. Protein metabolism, as you know, is included in competency number 5. Alright, now we have already discussed about how protein is digested, alright, and we have also discussed about transamination and deamination. We are discussing about catabolism of proteins. Alright, so let us sum it up what we discussed in our previous class. We told that the process of transamination and deamination actually are coupled together. So all amino acid are being converted to glutamate via the process of transamination via the enzyme transaminase, which needs pyridoxal phosphate as a cofactor, right? And then this glutamate, from this glutamate, free ammonia is released. Okay, by this reaction. This is known as glutamate dehydrogenase reaction. This is known as oxidative deamination. So transamination and deamination coupled makes transdeamination. Okay, so this is the major way how this amine skeleton is removed. Okay, we will be also discussing how the carbon skeleton is removed from amino acid. Still, if you have not seen the previous video, it's high time you pause this, go and watch this video. Watch that video and come back here. The link is in the description. Alright. So, now we move on to urea cycle. Okay. So, why urea cycle is important? Okay. See, ammonium salts are very toxic compounds in our body. The ammonia that is liberated, okay, can be captured by H plus ion, can grab a proton and form ammonium ion. If they accumulate inside body, they are very toxic. Okay. Moreover, what happens during oxidative deamination? Okay, the glutamate is being converted to alpha ketoglutarate. Okay, that way free ammonia is built up, right? And that ammonia is converted to ammonium ion, right? What happens actually, ammonium ion building up favors the synthesis of excess amount of glutamate, right? You see, this is a cycle that keeps on going, and in the process what is depleted? Alpha ketoglutarate is depleted. Okay, so if you forget everything, just know that excess ammonia is produced in the body. Excess ammonia leads to the formation of glutamate from alpha ketoglutarate, and that alpha ketoglutarate or oxoglutarate is a very important ingredient, intermediate of Krebs cycle or TCA cycle. So the problem is, when excess amount of ammonia or ammonium ion is built up in the body, it depletes alpha ketoglutarate, it depletes the intermediate of TCA cycle or Krebs cycle, and the body cannot produce energy, right? Because we need TCA cycle for energy production. Okay, so this in turn naturally decreases the ATP production. So what system is most affected? That is the brain. The nervous system is the most affected system or organ system that relies solely on ATP. Okay, well, everything relies on ATP, but it's the brain that bears the brunt of it. So we need some mechanism to remove this ammonia. Okay, and the answer to that is urea. Okay, so there comes the importance of urea cycle. We'll also be discussing how ammonia is toxic. This is the main mechanism, the main concern, that Krebs cycle is depleted. In our future lecture classes, we'll also discuss how ammonia is toxic. That's a separate topic in itself. But first we should understand, why do we learn urea cycle? Okay, so before going into the detailed urea cycle, we can just sum it up. Okay, we are doing the opposite thing. We are summing up first and then we will go into the detail, right? Why? Because if you don't have much time, you can simply get away with your answer by just quoting this thing, right? So the inputs into the urea cycle, I mean the things that are getting in the urea cycle, are ammonia, carbon dioxide, aspartic acid and ATP, aspartic acid or aspartate. Okay, and things that are getting out from urea cycle are urea, ADP and fumaric acid or fumarate. Okay, so urea cycle is a chain of reaction. Okay, there are multiple intermediates that keeps on interconverting between themselves, but something is coming and something is getting out. So carbon dioxide, ammonia and aspartate are the inputs, and also ATP, and ADP, urea and fumarate are outputs. Okay, so the first step, the most important step, the rate limiting step of urea cycle is synthesis of carbamoyl phosphate. Okay, CARBAMOYL, carbamoyl phosphate. And the enzyme that synthesizes carbamoyl phosphate uses high energy compound being ATP, right? From your enzymology concept, you know, any enzyme that is synthesizing a new compound with the help of a high energy phosphate bond is also known as synthetase. Okay, so the enzyme, okay, that catalyzes the first step of urea cycle is known as carbamoyl phosphate synthetase. Okay, so it is also abbreviated as CPS. Okay, so CPS is the first enzyme of urea cycle. What does it do? It converts, it utilizes carbon dioxide, ammonia and ATP, okay, to form carbamoyl phosphate. You see, the majority of the ingredients that are coming as input are actually grabbed in step 1 only, right? Only aspartate will get in an intermediate step. So ATP, carbon dioxide, ammonia leads to the formation of carbamoyl phosphate, and the enzyme is carbamoyl phosphate synthetase. One thing you need to know, that this enzyme also has an isoenzyme, right? Isoenzyme, this is the main enzyme. So just like in glycolysis you learned about phosphofructokinase 1, there is also another enzyme PFK2. Similarly, this is CPS1. The enzyme that takes place in that catalyzes urea cycle is known as CPS1. There is the isoenzyme CPS2 that is taking part in pyrimidine biosynthesis. Okay, so purines and pyrimidines, nucleic acid nucleotides. Okay, so CPS2 will come in pyrimidine biosynthesis. Examiner will ask you this question, mind it: CPS1 urea cycle, CPS2 pyrimidine biosynthesis. However, we need to just focus on CPS1. So this is the first step. Carbon dioxide, ammonia in presence of ATP forms carbamoyl phosphate. Okay, and this happens in the mitochondria, inside the mitochondria. So once carbamoyl phosphate is formed inside the mitochondria, okay, then carbamoyl phosphate actually enters the cyclical reaction. So what's the first step? Okay, the step after carbamoyl phosphate synthesis is that carbamoyl phosphate combines with ornithine, okay, and it forms citrulline. Okay, carbamoyl phosphate plus ornithine leads to the formation of citrulline. It also happens inside mitochondrial matrix, and the enzyme is ornithine transcarbamylase, or abbreviated as OTC, ornithine transcarbamylase. This citrulline that is formed is then transferred from mitochondrial matrix into the cytosol. Okay, so urea cycle is one of those cycles which partly happens in mitochondria and partly happens in cytosol. The first two steps, that is carbamoyl phosphate synthetase 1 step and the ornithine transcarbamylase step, they happen inside mitochondrial matrix, and the rest will happen in cytosol. So citrulline is being transported by a transporter system into the cytosol, right? There the next step happen. Okay, what is the next step? In the next step, citrulline reacts with an incoming aspartate. Okay, I told you aspartic acid is also another participant or input in the reaction. Okay, so aspartate plus citrulline in the presence of ATP, okay, under the action of the enzyme argininosuccinate synthase, it forms argininosuccinate. Okay, Yes, if you are wondering, this is a synthase enzyme and it also uses ATP. So the correct nomenclature should be argininosuccinate synthetase. Okay. However, you should see that in this reaction, not only one but two high energy phosphate bonds, two high energy phosphate bonds are actually used up. So ATP is not getting converted to ADP, it is getting converted to AMP and two inorganic phosphate. And the bond, I mean the high energy phosphate bond, is being utilized in this condensation reaction. Okay. So the second step is argininosuccinate synthetase step, where citrulline is being converted to argininosuccinate. Okay. In the next step, this argininosuccinate, it is being cleaved or broken down, okay, fragmented. What happens? It is converted to arginine. Okay. So argininosuccinate, you can see the name, there is succinic acid and arginine inside them. Okay, it's a coupled condensed thing. So argininosuccinate, it is converted to arginine and fumarate goes out. So fumarate is an output of the urea cycle we discussed. So the enzyme is argininosuccinate lyase. Okay. In the next step, so we haven't got our target molecule, that is urea. Okay. That happens in this next step. Arginine is hydrolyzed by the enzyme arginase. Okay. It's a hydrolase and it leads to production of urea, and arginine is converted to ornithine, and that ornithine is again transported inside the mitochondrial matrix by this transport system. Okay, thus completing the cycle. So in urea cycle, two components are transferred across the membrane. Ornithine is transported from cytosol to mitochondria, and citrulline is transported from mitochondria to cytosol. So the first step, carbamyl phosphate synthesis from CO2 and NH3 in the presence of ATP. This carbamyl phosphate converts with ornithine to form citrulline, from citrulline to argininosuccinate, argininosuccinate to arginine, and arginine to again ornithine. Okay, so just every textbook has got this figure. You need to know this, you need to draw this, because a long question will come on urea cycle and all the intermediate steps are important. If we look at the nitrogen count, what's exactly happening? Carbamyl phosphate is a single mononitrogenous compound. Okay, it combines with ornithine, which has got two nitrogen in its molecule, and it becomes citrulline. So citrulline is a triple nitrogen containing compound, 3 nitrogen. Another nitrogen is added in the form of aspartate. Okay, you must know the structure of aspartate. It's an important amino acid, aspartic acid. So argininosuccinate, it has 4 nitrogen. Arginine has got 4 nitrogen. Okay, and when it is converted to ornithine, which is a 2 carbon compound, 2 nitrogen is lost in the form of urea. So if you are maintaining nitrogen count, here is your total count. So 2 molecule combines with 1 to form N3, aspartate comes in, it forms N4, N4 is again converted to N2 and urea is lost. Okay. So the point is, it looks very similar to another cycle, right? If another cycle which you have read in carbohydrate metabolism is coming in your mind, you are absolutely right, because Krebs cycle and urea cycle are very closely related. How? The aspartate that is coming inside urea cycle is actually coming from Krebs cycle, from oxaloacetate, right? How it is formed? Via transamination, right? And the fumarate that is going out from urea cycle is an intermediate of TCA cycle. So fumarate comes in and aspartate comes out. So this thing, both are actually related. You know, the interesting thing is, the same scientist discovered both of them, that is Hans Krebs. So Hans Krebs discovered urea cycle, Hans Krebs discovered TCA cycle or Krebs cycle, right? Citric acid cycle. So these two, since it's connected, these two in conjunction is also known as Krebs bicycle. So when examiner asks you what is Krebs bicycle, you need to mention urea cycle and Krebs cycle. When combined from Krebs bicycle, the aspartate is formed from oxaloacetate which enters into the urea cycle, and the fumarate that comes out enters into the TCA cycle, right? Examiner can ask you another question, what is the fate of oxaloacetate? Okay, OAA. So oxaloacetate, if we combine our knowledge from both carbohydrate metabolism and protein metabolism, now we can say oxaloacetate has got 4 potential fate. Number 1, transamination to form aspartate. Okay, it can be converted to glucose via gluconeogenesis. Okay, it can lead to formation of citrate via the TCA cycle, right? And it can also lead to formation of pyruvate via gluconeogenesis. So if we sum up, the amine groups are first transaminated to form glutamate, but free ammonia is not released. How free ammonia is released? It is released in the deamination step. Okay, this combines with carbon dioxide and aspartate and forms urea, arginine and fumarate. These are all TCA cycle, urea cycle products, right? So transamination, deamination, when done, ultimately the final common pathway is they go into the urea cycle and thus leads to production of urea, which is the final excretory product in case of mammals, right? So are there any alternative method of nitrogen excretion? Okay, this is one method of nitrogen excretion. So yes, there are alternative methods in non-mammalian. If we consider non-mammalian animals, aquatic animals exert ammonia directly through gills, right? Terrestrial creatures like human beings excrete urea, right? But urea, in order to excrete urea, we need to dissolve it. Urea is soluble in water, but that means we must consume some amount of water minimum in order to excrete this nitrogen from our system. That mandates some amount of water drinking. So we cannot survive for long period without water. So it imposes a minimum daily water requirement. For arthropods, for birds, this is not the case. For example, in case of spiders, they directly excrete guanine. It's a very effective way, right? 5 nitrogen molecules are in one guanine. Okay, but in case of us, or in our case, we can excrete only 2 nitrogen form of urea, right? Reptiles and birds excrete uric acid. Uric acid is actually very insoluble in insoluble purine compound. So how do they do it? Okay, concentrated urine. Okay, their urine is supersaturated with uric acid. Okay, you already know from your biology lessons that in their case there is presence of cloaca, right? So this uric acid and water, okay, which is a supersaturated solution of uric acid actually, this goes from cloaca into the hind gut. But mind it, birds don't have the luxury to drink water like us. So this water needs to be preserved or conserved. So what happens? Uric acid from the solution, from the thick paste, okay, it crystallizes in their fecal matter, right? And this water is reabsorbed. Do we need to know this for our medical curriculum? Actually no, I am just telling you for your interest, if you are interested in animal species, right? However, you should know that in case of animals, okay, this is not the case. Excess uric acid animals cannot excrete like birds. Rather, excess uric acid in mammals, in human beings, is a big problem. Excess uric acid crystal will be deposited in joints and it will lead to formation of a painful inflammatory disorder that is known as gout. So we shouldn't have excess uric acid in our system. Rather, if we see uric acid is going up, we should modify our diet by which uric acid comes down. So the nitrogen skeleton, the nitrogen part is removed by transamination, deamination, oxidative deamination, and finally by urea cycle. And both transamination and oxidative deamination produce alpha keto acid, that is either aspartate or oxaloacetate, right? However, the carbon skeleton are still remaining. We told you nitrogen and carbon makes up amino acid. So carbon skeleton can be removed in different ways. The amino acid carbon skeleton that degrade to form Krebs cycle intermediate. What is the Krebs cycle intermediate? Fumarate, right? They can be used to make glucose via gluconeogenesis. Okay, those are basically glucogenic amino acid, right? Alanine, aspartate. And the amino acid carbon skeleton that degrade to form acetyl coenzyme A or acetoacetyl coenzyme A, okay, will be telling you how each and every amino acid degrades in individual amino acid metabolism. For now, you should just know amino acid can have two fate. Either it is being converted to carbohydrates or to ketone bodies. One which is converted to carbohydrates are known as glucogenic amino acid, rather produce glucose. And there are few amino acid whose carbon skeleton actually breaks down in such a way that they lead to formation of acetyl coenzyme or acetoacetyl CoA. These are nothing but precursor of ketone body synthesis. We will be reading in lipid metabolism. These are known as ketogenic amino acid. Whereas some amino acids can do both, best of both worlds, okay. So they are combined glucogenic and ketogenic, and I am sure you must be knowing by now which amino acids are purely glucogenic, what are purely ketogenic, and what are mixed, right? So this will be continued. I will finish my lecture today. What remains is disorders of urea cycle. What will happen if any enzyme in urea cycle is deficient, right? This will lead to production of ammonia. I mean, ammonia will not be removed from the system because we need urea cycle to remove ammonia. So ammonia will exert its toxic effect. So our next topic will be disorders of urea cycle and ammonia toxicity. So please update yourself with the previous part and this part, and we will be seeing you soon with the next part. So feel free to ask any comments in the, feel free to ask any question in the comment section, and I will see you soon with another video. And if you have watched this video till now, please type the word toxic in the comment section. I will know that you are watching this video. So I thank you all for your patient hearing, and I'll see you soon. Till then, bye and take care.